Hi there, I'm Jen, and this is the Roving Crafters, and this is Knitting with Beads Part 2. Part 1 was also knitting with beads, but that got done by pre-stringing. We took our beads and strung them onto the working yarn and then cast it on. And then started our knitting and pulled a bead up from the stack off of the working yarn and pulled it up and worked it into our knitting. There are other ways, and the other way is to set a bead as you go, no pre-stringing. You get to the part of your knitting where you want to bead, and then you work a bead onto an individual stitch. And you do that by temporarily sliding that stitch off the left needle using a special tool of some kind, and the tools vary, but the method is all the same. You use that tool to thread one of your stubborn little beads onto the stitch so that it sits literally down on the stitch against the row that you have knit previously. You take that stitch, slide it back onto the left needle, and knit it. I always tell people, and knit it like the bead's not there. So here's how we do that. I'm going to knit over a few without beads. 2, 3, okay. Yeah, you're going to be my first beaded stitch. So as I said, there's different tools you can use. The first tool I'm going to use is a tiny crochet hook. Really tiny. I don't even know if you can see the hook on the end of it. This is a US size 6. Size 6? I think it's 1.4 millimeters. And I'm going to use it with a size 4.0 bead. You pick up the bead with the hook like that. And it sits in your hook while you use your hook to slide that stitch off the left needle. Grab the stitch with the little tiny hook and slide the bead down onto the stitch like that. And it's literally sits like a collar on the stitch. Then you put it back on your left needle, put down your crochet hook, and knit it. It will be a little tight, it will be a little stiff because of course some of the room of your stitch is taken up with that bead. Like that. Let's do one more with the crochet hook. Remember, use your crochet hook, pick up a bead, slide the next unworked stitch off your left needle, coax your bead down onto your stitch, put your stitch back on the left needle, drop your hook, and knit it. Or purl it, or cable with it, anything. They show up on the front and on the back, of course, because they're literally sitting like a collar. And if you'll notice, they sit on the live stitch as you knit. You're making the new stitch and it's sitting on what has become the row below. So keep that in mind if you're working out your own bead placement. As I said, you can use different tools. You can literally use any tool you want. And I've been present at many vigorous debates as to what the best tool to use is. Some people really like that crochet hook. It's easy. And a lot of people already have a whole collection of tiny little crochet hooks to dive into. That's great. The most common is dental floss, and to do that you would take all of the beads, a lot of the beads, not all of them, that you want to use, and you can pre-string them on the floss. And anyway, that's not what I do. I like dental floss threader. Let's see, this thing is so tiny it's almost invisible. Give you a little background there. It's a tiny little piece of plastic. Straight on this end, and a loop on this end, very flexible, and small enough that you can literally put almost any size bead onto it. So, you would pick up a bead with your floss threader, put you down right there. Now, we want to slide that next stitch off with our dental floss threader. You know, this is so tiny it's hard to see. Like that. Okay. Now you need to take the pointy end of your dental floss threader and push it back up into the bead. So now your bead has 2 pieces of floss through it, like so. Hold them both in your right hand and slide that bead down onto your stitch. Put the stitch back on the left needle, just like we did before. Put it back on the left needle without splitting it, Jen. There we go. Take your floss out and knit. One more. Let's pick up a bead. Let's pick up a blue bead. Like that. Use the threader. Slide your next stitch off the left needle. Bend the end of the thread back up into the bead. Hold both ends. Push the bead onto the stitch, like so, and put the stitch back on the left needle. And you're saying, that's tedious. Yes, it is. Beading each stitch as you go can be quite tedious, and it doesn't really matter what tool you use because you're always having to stop. Like breaking the rhythm, you have to stop. Stick a bead on. Okay, now I'm going to work this piece up for a few rows and let you take another look at it. Okay, so what do you think? That's how they would look on the knitted side, the right side of the front side. But you know, they show up very well on the reverse stockinette side, on the purl side, on the long side. Now, one more thing before I let you go, before I end class, and that's how do you manage something that would be like a knit two together. So we wanted to knit two together, but we wanted that stitch to be beaded. Aha. Okay. Well, of course you can do it any way you like. I'm going to pick up a bead with my threader, and I'm going to slide both stitches off. First one, and then the other onto my threader. Okay, 2 stitches. Bend my threader around, back into the bead, and use this to push the bead down onto 2 stitches at once, which can be a little stiff. You have to really push. There we go, like that. Like that. And then I've got the 2 stitches there. And I'm going to put those stitches, let's see, pick them up first the right, but they really need to go back onto the left needle. And then knit them together. You're going to find that this is really stiff to get into. Now come here. Take 2. Get in there. And knit them together. Yeah. That you can place it with a yarn over. And that's helpful if you're trying to bead in a pattern that has a lot of lace work in it. You can do the same thing with a slip slip knit, but first, just me, I do the slip slip, and then I take the stitches off the right needle and beat them. So, pick you up, turn it around. I like to turn it around because I'm so used to picking those stitches off the left side and not the right side. So I make it the left side. I'm just turning it around. Ha. Okay, got the stitches off and onto the threader. Bend my threader back around and into my bead. And then really shove to get one bead over 2 stitches. Like that. There they are. Turn it back around to the right side. Get them back on right needle. And then do the knit part of the slip slip knit, which can be stubborn because there's not much room to work with there. Yeah. Sharp tips, that's what you need. Ta-da! And I'm going to work the yarn over to make up for my decrease. There we go. It certainly is easier to set the beads on plain knit or plain purl stitches, work a single stitch and set the bead on it. But if you're doing a complicated bead pattern, there's going to be a time where you need to put a bead on what is basically a decrease stitch. And it can be done, it's just a little fiddly. So there you go. Hope you like it. Hope I've convinced you to try beads. Till next time.